Alright. 8th grade.
When did you get Snapchat? What grade?
5th grade.
5th grade? What? Yo, see?
So, I've been anticipating for this movie for quite a while. Mostly because I think Burnham is a pretty funny comedian. And I was kind of interested to see what he brings into the table in terms of filmmaking. His trailer looked really good. And then I heard it's been into Sundance, lots of praises from critics and audiences. And I can see why. Like, I was just kind of thinking like it's gonna be like Lady Bird, where it's gonna be like a nice little coming-of-age middle school kind of movie, when it's a little bit more than that. In a way, the best way I can really describe this movie, it feels so much like The Office, where not really as like the style, like not like the mockumentary style of the film, but it almost has that same humor and drama, where it feels like you're in this real world with real people, and you have this one character who has a goal for something, and one of her biggest conflicts in the movie was just not to be embarrassed, and God, you could definitely feel that. Like, this movie has the perfect balance of cringe. Like, it has both funny, cringy moments where it's like, you know the character's gonna do something that might not be normal, and then you kind of like,
We will begin to explore these changing bodies of yours. It's gonna be lit.
And then there's even some cringy drama too. Not as in like cringy drama as in like bad cringy drama, but more like, you know, stuff that makes you uncomfortable, surprisingly. And I kind of dig into that shit. You know, I love Silence of the Lambs. That kind of gets me into that, but that's kind of a different movie. 8th grade is just more like a comedy. I really like the story, especially the characters. I think especially the main character, she's really interesting and likable to follow. You totally understand her motives and what she's going for. She's just a person who wants to be liked. So, I mean, that's kind of a relatable thing to go for. Another thing I really liked about this movie was that I really love how the kids were written. Like, usually when you see, like, I mean, in high school movies or high school shows, usually the way how they depict high school or middle school students are usually super unrealistic. Like, not just the fact that they would cast, like, 20-year-olds to play as high schoolers or kids in school, but it looked like they actually got real kids from middle school, or at least kids that look young enough to be that age, and they also act like those kids. That's another thing I really loved about this, is that, you know, again, if you see those high school or middle school movies depicting those kids, you know, sometimes it's all about stereotypes, the nerds and all that stuff. While it's there, it's like, especially to the popular, the only thing that's a big major concern when you're going through middle school, especially when your perspective of a middle school kid is, you know, if you're popular or not. That's kind of like the big major consensus with middle school. And I love how the popular kids, they don't just not like the popular kids or the unpopular kids just because, oh, I don't like them because they're ugly and stuff. No, they just don't care.
By the way, I like your shirt a lot. It's like so cool. What?
They just kind of move on with their lives and they're just like, yeah, whatever. That's kind of what most kids are like these days. Another thing I really love is that's realistic is the dialogue. The dialogue is just so on-pitch really great. It felt so natural. Nothing felt so cheesy. The only thing that felt like a nice balance of like nice motivational quotes that doesn't sound too cheesy is when the main character would just kind of make videos about, you know, about confidence or trying to achieve something in middle school, or trying to make some friends or getting with a relationship with somebody. And that's kind of really neat. I also love the cast. Everybody does such a fantastic job. Even Elsie Fisher, I think that's her name, she really stands out in this movie. It's usually like a 50-50 thing with teenage actors and actresses. They're either sometimes really, really bad, which I wouldn't blame it on them. I mostly blame it on poor direction. But sometimes if you get the right director, you can actually get those kids to act decent. And Elsie Fisher is definitely really, really, really good in this movie. Another thing to talk about is the score. I think it's okay. Like, I love synth scores, and I think the synth score definitely worked with this movie. And there were definitely some song choices I thought they were great. Like, there's this one synth dubstep music that's kind of used for the main character's crush. It's like this big... But it works within the movie, but I don't think it's great on its own for some reason. I don't know. There's some scores that kind of felt like there were songs from GarageBand, which I don't know, it doesn't really feel like it has a ton of quality to listen to on its own. And I think that works fine in this movie. It's just the score just kind of just doesn't work on its own. And speaking of the score, which I'm not a big fan of, another thing I kind of didn't like about this movie, probably the most major thing that kind of almost put me off. Despite really, really love this movie, and this didn't really took out my enjoyment, but I think the cinematography is not really that great. I mean, there's lots of really creative composition shots, but for the most part, I'm not a big fan of the handheld look. There's some shots that I think would look pretty good if it was still to deliver some of the funny moments, but I just can't help but thinking that there's a guy holding a camera, and you can easily see that somebody's holding it, and it's just kind of shaking, kind of like in this kind of a quality, and it just looks really, really off. Other than that, I thought this movie was great. I'm sorry. I'm not gonna do that again. But I love this movie. I thought it was really, really fantastic. It's probably my second favorite film of the year so far. I love these kind of movies, and this one really stands out for being realistically unique with a film that portrays middle school. And I think this movie does it so perfectly. Now, if I were gonna give this movie a rating, I would give it like a 9 out of 10. I seriously recommend this to everybody. Like, seriously, go watch it. If it's playing in your limited theaters, I highly recommend it. In fact, I can't wait to see it again. It's just so good.